Welcome back, everyone. It is LaughNgamez here, and today we're back with another Starcraft 2 replay. Today it is a TVP on Ruins of Endion between NaNiwa and SortOf. So spawning in the right corner is SortOf, and spawning in the left corner is NaNiwa. Both of these two players are actually currently teamless. NaNiwa definitely the more notable player, but SortOf is actually doing quite well of late, and I guess so that's how these two players are doing right now. So it'll actually be interesting to see how these two match up. Now this cast match is actually from the ESL Cup, so these guys actually played 5 matches, I believe, so we'll see how they go. Anyway, so we've got NaNiwa spawning up in the top left on this odd-shaped map is the way to put it. It's sort of Blizzard experimenting with the close but far concept, and by that I mean the main bases are actually quite close, but there's sort of obstacles separating them. For example, each player has destructible rocks outside their base, which allows players to take relatively quick thirds if they want to, but then later on in the game there's these paths which will allow players to get to each other much closer. So that's what I mean by the close but far concept. Now NaNiwa actually moving out with this scouting probe, just trying to see what's up. Now of course it is only a 2-player map, so he knows where SortOf spawned, but ultimately wants to check to see how things are going, make sure nothing cheesy is happening, because cheese can happen on this map, particularly in this ZVP matchup. But SortOf has actually just opened up with a hatchery first, so macro-oriented opening. Meanwhile, NaNiwa getting his second gas as a Protoss, throwing up that Nexus, and of course SortOf is seeing all this with his Overlord Scout. So sort of just finishing up the spawning pool. Queen started, so a completely normal game going on right now, but really it could differentiate really fast, and SortOf getting that very quick Zergling speed because he got the fairly early gas. So he wants to have that map control as a Zerg player, wants to be able to control the flow of the game in a sense. Now NaNiwa is actually placing a pylon right outside, which it sort of seems almost out in the middle of nowhere, but it's not, because it is outside his natural base, but this pylon is actually right next to these rocks for defense, because once these rocks come down, SortOf will have to break down some rocks to get into NaNiwa's base, whether they be in the north, the center, or the south, to get to NaNiwa. So if NaNiwa secures this position with a pylon, which is defensive, he will be able to safely macro up if he chooses to. Now NaNiwa going for a Stargate, while SortOf is throwing up his third base, getting actually pneumatized Carapace, which allows Overlords to move faster. So this could be for one of two things. SortOf might want to go for some sort of drops, or SortOf might just want to properly scout what NaNiwa's doing. But regardless, SortOf has not actually scouted this Stargate, so if it is an Oracle, it will come by surprise. But it is not a surprise that NaNiwa's opening up a Stargate, because Stargates are fairly common in ZVP right now. Protoss want to have that control. And now the Mothership Core for NaNiwa actually sneaking across the map, trying to pick off any drones it can, but it actually doesn't have enough energy for a recall, so it's going to have to run out of there. As the Queen might actually manage to pick this off. It's getting close, but the Mothership Core will just barely escape. Lots of the paint and health off that. So that was actually fairly close. Now if we look back, we see NaNiwa has destroyed these rocks, throwing up a third Nexus because he knows he's fairly safe. Meanwhile, SortOf is just sending out his Zerglings, getting up his own third base, which is actually done now. So really we're going into quite a macro game here. SortOf making additional queens, as Zerg does, wants to get up that creep spread. And is actually now getting an Evo Chamber and a Baneling Nest, so this very well could be for some Baneling drops at some point in the game, because he got that Overlord speed, so he will be able to make dropper Overlords once that Evolution Chamber finishes. He will be able to morph Banelings, so Baneling drops have potential to do huge damage, particularly with how close their bases are, so these could sort of come in from anywhere, but NaNiwa hard countering this because he's getting out double Stargate, so he's going to be going into a mass Phoenix play, which is very smart on this map because you want to be able to control the space in between. You're able to harass amazingly, see what's going on, defend from defend from attacking forces with these Phoenix very well, but he's actually losing some of the health on one of these Phoenix, which is sort of sloppy. But now 3 Phoenix, and the Phoenix count is going up quite quickly because of the double Stargate, which is being chrono boosted into. So he wants to get up this Phoenix count fast, and once he does, he'll be able to start doing some damage, but not getting up that Phoenix count fast, as he's actually just lost one for free. That Phoenix did literally nothing besides scout, and he hasn't even fully scouted SortOf's base, so he has not seen this Baneling Nest or Evo Chamber. Now SortOf actually throwing up another Evo Chamber after seeing these Phoenix. He probably had originally intended to go for at least maybe 1 or 2 Baneling drops, but he sees the Phoenix. He knows it's not worth to invest into it. But meanwhile, all SortOf has to defend these Phoenix is Queens, so he's trying to get out. He's gonna want to get out lots of creep spread so these Queens can move around freely. So he's throwing up a tumor so they can go in between the bases quickly. Now, if we see, SortOf is actually going for a Baneling drop. I must have missed that, but he's got 3 Banelings and 2 Zerglings, and coming in from a very bizarre angle, an angle which he knows that the Phoenix aren't likely going to be patrolling up here. So NaNiwa has no idea that this is coming in. The third base is quite saturated, so this is going to come in by complete surprise. Let's see how many probes it can kill. Let's see. Okay, the Banelings are going to be dropping. SortOf just having this rally. 9 probes go down, and he's going to be using these 2 Zerglings to pick off any more that he can. So 10 probes in total. Probably going to be 11, maybe a 12. SortOf needs to focus that weak probe. Oh, unfortunately he doesn't. Still, 11 drones is huge. Meanwhile, NaNiwa getting some great harassment off with these Phoenix, microing back the weakened ones, and actually took a direct head-on engagement versus the Queens of SortOf. So this is giving NaNiwa amazing control of the game right here. Sure, he lost probes, but he's on 3 Nexus. He'll be able to reproduce those, and he's actually in a probe lead versus SortOf, who's been teching and not exactly focusing completely on macro, although now SortOf is throwing up a 4th base. SortOf now knows, okay, I lost these Queens, I should try to do some counter-attack damage. Meanwhile, these Zerglings with their +1 attack is tearing into these rocks, making NaNiwa very nervous because he knows that once those rocks are gone, these Lings will be able to run and they'll be able to start doing counter-harass. They'll be able to put pressure on NaNiwa by all means. Now SortOf, as I said earlier, he wasn't macroing. He's not macroing necessarily in the defense, in the greedy sense. He's going for a fast tech, and is actually getting energy or pathogen guns, which will give infestors more energy. So his plan to engage these Phoenix is likely a bunch of Queens and infestors. If he manages to get a fungal growth on the Queens, on the Phoenix, sorry, then the Queens will be able to deal with them very, very well. So the Phoenix is trying to pick up anything they really can. Actually, a few kills between them all. If we actually look at the units lost tab, we'll see NaNiwa has lost 1,000 less resources than SortOf. Now, if we see further, we're going to see quite a surprise here. NaNiwa is teching into a very rarely seen unit, a tier 3 unit, which takes so long to build, the carrier. So NaNiwa is producing 3 carriers at a time currently, throwing up another Stargate. He's going into a mass air. SortOf is not going to expect this coming. It's not exactly a common style, and SortOf has actually only seen 2 of the Stargates, so he's assuming that's where the Phoenix are from, when really NaNiwa's on 4. He's getting ship upgrades. He's already gotten +1 ship attack, and he's getting +2 ship attack. He's getting the carrier upgrades. This is going to be a complete surprise for SortOf. He's not investing as much into anti-air as he should be, but he's actually getting a Spire now. So for SortOf to deal with this, he's going to need Corruptors, lots of Corruptors to deal with this, maybe with some fungal growth and Queens thrown in, but really, most importantly out of anything, he needs to scout that this is happening. Otherwise, it's just going to completely blindside him and end the game for NaNiwa. So now we see here plenty of Queens for SortOf, but mainly just sticking on Zerglings, droning so heavily. When NaNiwa is quick, as long as carriers take to build, NaNiwa is building up quite a strong count, and he's actually going to possibly reveal these 2 carriers he has, because he knows how little anti-air SortOf has, but these infestors have so much energy and could do such huge damage here. This could be very close. The Queens have plenty of energy for transfuses. SortOf actually using a fungal growth on the interceptors there, and NaNiwa being forced to recall, not getting as much damage as he done. I think it was a bit of a mistake for NaNiwa to show his carriers, because now SortOf is going to spend everything he's got into preparing for these carriers when it's still a surprise. Now NaNiwa is at even supply with SortOf. SortOf has actually invested into tons of anti-air now. He's throwing up so many spore crawlers. Great versus interceptors. They absorb the damage. But now NaNiwa just continuously producing more carriers, getting up cannons for static defense in case he loses his interceptors and needs to pull back so corruptors can't engage over them. Now, getting a mothership, so this is going into a very early late game by all means. Like, these units would not normally be out by this time in the game, but these two players are teching incredibly fast by all means. Now, NaNiwa has a very weak ground army, so SortOf can really choose any path that he wishes to engage these carriers. Now we actually see these Zerglings have gone and they've taken down the back rocks. They're going to run in and do a bunch of counterattack damage, but there's so many carriers, so many cannons to defend this for NaNiwa. NaNiwa is actually happily on his 4th base. SortOf is getting up his 6th and 7th base, actually opting to take the gold base, which is so close to NaNiwa. NaNiwa does not know this is happening, but once he does, he'll be trying to stop it for sure. And now, as I mentioned earlier in this game, SortOf is starting to push across, and he's so close to NaNiwa because these rocks have been broken down. Now, one thing I would like to note about SortOf is he's not very high on the corruptors count. He's literally only has 1 corruptor right now with 5 more making. To engage carriers, you're going to need a bunch more corruptors or more anti-air. This Mass Queen is interesting, but carriers stack very well versus everything but corruptors, I'd say. Throwing down plenty of fungal growth to try and catch these interceptors, just pausing them in the air, preventing them from attacking, which is so huge because that's all the damage the carriers does. The Phoenix are moving around, picking up the infestors, trying to pick them all off because they are so critical for SortOf's defense from these carriers. These carriers have lost tons of their interceptors. They're rebuilding them as fast as possible. NaNiwa killing off the gold base and is likely going to pull back. Yes, SortOf forces him back. So now SortOf is on a bunch of queens for defense. He's got more corruptors on the way, but he's lacking air upgrades for these corruptors, whereas NaNiwa is now producing many void rays and has actually got high attack upgrades. He's got +3 on his attack. He's getting armor upgrades. These interceptors and carriers and void rays are going to do so much damage. Actually being forced to expel some of his parasitic bomb, which he was relying on for this air defense, onto the Phoenix. NaNiwa being so effective with the Phoenix to deal damage by picking off critical units such as this Viper and Infestor, which SortOf wants to use these for a big fight, for a big defense, not to tell a few Phoenix to go away. So now we see SortOf is getting his macro to a very good spot. He's at a high worker count, and so he's in no means struggling for cash. So he really needs to take an effective engagement, get an effective army, because he's behind in supply right now, and he was actually still trying to defend this position, which was almost a mistake because it sort of enticed NaNiwa forward. NaNiwa knows the position he's in. He's got so much more supply than SortOf. SortOf is making as many corruptors as he can in the last second here to defend, but he's lost so many of his infestors. He's lost one of his Vipers, which is incredibly important to deal with this. Like, these Void Rays for NaNiwa are now actually going into the main base with the carriers, and they're just going to pick off all the tech. He's going to lose the 2 Spires, which is going to spell lights out, seemingly, because there'll be nothing that SortOf will be able to make as anti-air. He's going to lose his infestation pit, no more infestors. He's lost his Spires, no more corruptors. I think this is almost checkmate. So it seems that SortOf's probably looking to go for one final engagement. Possibly going to throw down a fungal. He throws down some fungals. He hits all the carriers, but these interceptors are doing so much damage, picking off all the corruptors. They don't stand a chance. SortOf just invested so much in different tech and did not choose a proper way to deal with this air army because he was not properly aware of the situation. Thank you for watching, guys. This has been a great PvZ cast between NaNiwa and SortOf. It had a great build-up, so I might actually cast more of the games from this series. It was a best of 5 between them. So, as I've said before, thank you for watching. Feedback is very well encouraged. Now, if you actually look here, look at the resources lost. SortOf lost 19,000 resources almost, and NaNiwa lost well under half of that. That is an insane resources loss difference between the two players. So, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.